stories about the park and feature the great scientists, hikers, mountain men, women.
Tell us a little bit about your upcoming book.
Well, I got a book I've been working on for a while called When the West Was Tennessee, which should have the river, story of once upon the Tennessee. It'll have William Bartram, the unlikely explorer, Henry Timberlake's memoirs, a writing of that, and half a dozen other stories. But I think it's about the 18th century exploring of the region, what the Boone and the Long Hunters ate, and some of the layouts of the early roads and some of the adventures that sort of foreshadowed the coming of our people.
You have a wildflower, a tree, a particular plant that you can tell
Whew.
us about?
There's a lot of them. I mean, I've never been with a wildflower person that didn't have a story about every single one. I mean, I first fell in love with the flame azalea, just like everybody else, and tried to grow some, and eventually found a hybrid that I could keep alive for a little while and put them in front of my cabin, my house. And I learned that from Bartram. And Bartram said, coming through here, that on a horse, that they thought that the horse's legs were on fire or bleeding because flame azaleas were red up to the horse's haunches. And Bartram was very special to us because he was the subject of our pilot program. So the very first Heartland show was William Bartram, the flower hunter, Puck Puggy. The Indians called him Puck Puggy. And the first line of the first Heartland episode was, "Small, quiet, he was a Quaker who loved nature." Let's see. And he was an unlikely explorer. He wasn't an explorer or a mountain man. He was a botanist. And it's pretty appropriate that sort of the guy who first wrote about the Great Smoky Mountains was a botanist. And that's, since there are more species of plants in the Great Smoky Mountains in all of Europe and more kinds of trees, that's appropriate for the Smokies. Been coming all my life, and then eventually lived up here.
Wow.
For a time.
And this is the year of the centennial of the national parks, and Great Smoky Mountains is the #1 most visited.
Yeah, and it's here in the central part of the United States, you know, and it's our particular jewel of the Smokies. And I've been lucky enough to get to come up here get paid to come up here, do stories about the park and feature the great scientists and hikers and mountain men and women, and enjoyed it. 25 years.
It's a shame that more people don't know about him. And
I think so too, and that's why Bartram was the pilot. So we we introduced the region with the flower hunter.
Right. I love that name, Flower Hunter.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
that's what he wanted to do for a living. He got to do it for a while.
Right. Is there a particular wildflower? Other the flame azalea is more of a shrub. Is there a particular wildflower that you like here?
Oh, there's Yeah, I like fire pink, and I like the Hercules Club was a great little story that Dr. Sharp showed us that it looks like the leaves of a Hercules Club are bushes, even entire limbs, but they're not. The flower, the leaves of Hercules Club is an entire arm. It's the whole thing, and that's kind of neat. It's also a very rough-looking thing to grab, so it makes for a good named plant because it does look like it's got big thorns all over it, so you better be careful if you're going to grab it. But I remember Dr. Sharp telling me that 35 years ago, so particularly close to my heart.
Excellent. And the passion flower, I saw some over here in bloom with the fruit right on it. That's the state wildflower of Tennessee.
Yeah, I like the purple. Let's see, those two, what are those two late summer flowers that are sort of,
Oh, the chicory, which is
chicory, the
non-native.
big one, the big blue
Oh,
one.
the ironweed.
Ironweed, I like ironweed.
That's the most beautiful shade of purple, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
So lucky to get my wife and I have two Franklinias that bloom this year.
Oh, how exciting. Bartram is
Yeah.
over in his grave right now.
I've got a picture of a Franklinia on my phone.
Good for you. That's wonderful. Too bad you didn't sport a blossom behind your ears.
Yeah, they remember the line that Franklinia has different flowers every day.
I like that.
Just like you can start your day over again.
I like that.
Get along with everybody. That was another story about Bartram I liked, that there was an event. Bartram never wrote about the scoundrels, the mean and bad things. He kept his purpose on wild nature and the beauty of nature. And there was a murderer that escaped from somewhere in North Florida, and he was coming down near Amelia Island, and he saw the guy. He was on horseback, and he didn't want to jump into the weeds to hide, so he just kept going. And when he got close to the guy who was a murderer, killed people, Bartram didn't know it at the time. He jumped off the horse and ran up to him and stuck his hand out and said, "How goes it, neighbor? How goes it, neighbor?" Well, if you're going to kill a guy, it's hard to kill a guy when he says, "How goes it, neighbor?" So, I mean, Bartram never said a bad word about anybody. And even though they thought, his ideas of black people and Native Americans can teach us things were ahead of its day. And, these ideas he had maybe were ahead of his time. But Bartram, if you look at that giant book, Bartram's travels about that big, that he never said a bad word about anybody. But that's admirable.